The first one that you found is the one I pointed out in verse 6, right?
Yeah.
And it's basically the people went after idols, and God says they didn't say, "Where's the Lord who brought us from the land of Egypt, who led us in the wilderness?" They're not looking to God at all. So that's something that we see about them. What's the next one that you guys saw?
The priest.
In verse 8, the priests didn't say, "Where's the Lord?" So that we have the priests not inquiring of the Lord, not seeking after God. And again, this fits into the theme of corrupt leadership as well. So what's the next one you found? 15? 13? Okay. Yeah, I don't have one there, but sometimes translations are different. What's the next one? 20? Yeah. It says, "For long ago you broke your yoke and burst your bonds, and you said, 'I will not serve.'" So they were called to be God's people and submit to him like an oxen, plowing a field or something, but they've broken off of that, and they say, "I won't serve, I'm going to do what I want to do." And then it goes on to talk about how they prostituted themselves amongst all the nations. Good. So what's the next one? 23, yeah. In 23, even though they've done all of that, they claim they're innocent. They're like, "I'm not defiled. I didn't go after the Baals." So they're like in denial, right? Like they sin and they do all this wickedness, and they're like, "I didn't do it. I'm not the one. You can't judge me." And so that's a hard attitude to deal with, is people who won't admit that they sinned, right? They're like, "I haven't done anything wrong," and so we see the hardness of their hearts in that part. But then later in verse 25, we almost see them saying the opposite. What do they say in verse 25? Yeah, in verse 25, they're like, "I can't help it. Why even try? I just have to go after him. I can't stop myself." And I think those are two common attitudes we see in hardened hearts today, too. Some people are like, what I'm doing is not wrong. I haven't done anything wrong. And then you get other people, they're like, "Well, it's not my fault, it's society, I'm a victim, and I couldn't help myself," and then they want to blame everybody else for the things that they've done wrong, too. And so we see kind of that kind of attitude. And then in verse 27, what does it say there? Talk about an insult to your Creator, saying somebody else made you and somebody else gave you birth. That's got to hurt. Like, it would hurt me if Jude said to me, "You're not my mom. I'm not your kid." Like, I know he's my kid. Pregnancy was horrible. and that's such an insult to say, and yet that's their attitude towards God is, "Oh, you're not the one who delivered us from Egypt. You're not the one who's done anything good for us. It's our idols," and that's like a really hard thing that they're saying. But then in verse 27, what do they say farther on at the bottom? Yeah. And we're so guilty of that today, too, if you think about our idolatry, right? We spend all of our time chasing after stupid things that we're making more important than God, whether it's fame or popularity or our looks. But then what happens when something bad happens to us? "Oh, God, I need you." And our prayer life suddenly gets really amazing, right? And that's not right. That's not lordship. But that's basically what these guys are doing. They don't give God any honor, any glory. He's not their Lord, but then when something bad happens, they're crying out to God all the time and expecting him to come and save them. And so that just shows that they're using God like a good luck charm, but they're not actually submitted to him or letting him be the Lord of their lives. And we need to make sure we don't do that as well. All right, where's the next one? 31? Yeah, you're right. So here in this context, that he's saying, "Have I been bad to you? Like, have I treated you wrong? Is that why you say, 'We're free, we will not come to you anymore'?" So he's basically saying, "Was I really bad, and that's why you won't listen?" Is that my baby? That I'm sure if it is, he'll be here soon enough, but I hope it's not. So maybe. Okay, we'll try to wrap it up quickly then. So anyway, so we see that they just are saying, we don't have any obligation to someone. No one did anything cool for us that we need to be loyal to, which is a really bad attitude to have when God delivered them out of slavery in Egypt and chose them to be his own people. And then finally, In verse 35, we have the denial again. They're saying, I am innocent. Surely his anger is turned from me. And that's basically saying, hey, whatever I've done is not that bad. Like, why would God be mad at me? Like, it wasn't really a big deal or anything. So they're making light of their breaking of the covenant. And so that just shows something about their heart attitude as well. They say in 35 again, I have not sinned. So do you guys see how looking at those things can help you to understand a little bit more of the heart attitude of the people? So hopefully that will help you for the rest of the book, and it will also help you for Ezekiel, because Ezekiel does this too. God's quoting the people back to them all the time in that book as well. All right. Well, what we'll look at, unless my baby comes through the door, is we're going to look at the reign of Josiah briefly, and this is the context for the first 20 chapters of the book. And this is kind of hard sometimes because if you guys remember during Kings, Josiah was one of the best kings, right? And he cleanses the land, and there's this big revival, and it's really awesome. And so then when we read the first 20 chapters of Jeremiah, and he's telling the people what losers they are a lot of the times, like chapter 2 was written during the time of Josiah, there's two options. One is he either prophesied all of these things before the book of the law was found, which is possible, but then it would be harder to believe that he could quote Deuteronomy so well and stuff like that. But it's probably likely that a lot of these prophecies were given after the temple was cleansed as well. I mean, he prophesies at the temple in chapters 7 through 10. And so what we see in this is that even though Josiah was this awesome king, just like today, like what if Billy Graham was the president of the United States? Does that mean every person would suddenly start following God? Like even if he preached great sermons on CNN every day and told everyone to join a church, does that mean all the people involved in all sorts of the weirdness that's going on would just suddenly quit doing that? No, and it's the same with the people of Judah. He was a good king, and he did his best, and there was revival, but it's not like the people were these mindless zombies that just were like, oh, now we're all this kind of people. Like that didn't happen. I mean, he condemned all the idolatry. He tore down the high places. He did all of those things, but you can't change people's hearts. They have to want to change their hearts themselves. So as much as Josiah was a righteous king and did everything right to honor God and tried to lead the people in righteousness, the people still had their own free will, and a lot of them still were worshiping idols. They would just do it more secretly. And they were still maybe sacrificing their kids. They were still cheating the poor. They were still doing social injustice type things. He couldn't make them stop any more than anyone today can make people stop doing things like that. So there is still a lot of this wickedness going on in the land. So anyway, just a refresher here, it says it on the screen, but he was the 16th king of Judah, and he became king at the age of 8, and he didn't have a godly father either. But God got a hold of his heart, and he began to seek God when he was 16 years old. And then when he was 20, he cleansed the land. So that was in 628. So you can see all these dates on the timeline over there, but I know it's hard to see from where most of you guys are sitting. And then when he was 26 years old, that's when the book of the law was found and read, and that's when the full revival started, where he read it to all the people, he tore down all the high places. Like that's when one of the biggest, maybe the biggest revival in the history of Judah took place was during this time. And then I don't know if you guys remember, he died at the Battle of Megiddo in 609. Do you guys remember what the Battle of Megiddo was about? Egypt. Good job. And where was Egypt going? They were marching up, and what were they going to do? Yeah, they were actually going to go help Assyria because Assyria was going down and Babylon was rising. So the Assyrians called on the Egyptians in kind of an alliance, like, come help us throw off Babylon or they're going to come get you too. And so they were marching up to go help the Assyrians by fighting against Babylon. And Josiah's thinking was, wait, I don't want anyone to help the Assyrians. They already took a lot of my land into captivity. The northern kingdom went into exile by them. So I want to stop this partnership for my own protection, kind of. But we don't see him seeking God about it or anything, and it was actually a pretty foolish thing to do. And he dies in trying to battle the Egyptians. And they just keep marching north. They take him off the throne. Well, he died. And his son Jehoahaz was the heir to the throne, so they put him on the throne. But then the Egyptians said, no, you don't get to be the king. We're going to make Jehoiakim king. And a lot of times we see this happen with the Babylonians too. Now, if you're the second brother, right, you're not the heir to the throne, right? But if the real heir is taken away or killed, and then suddenly, ta-da, you get to be the king, you might be a little bit more loyal than your brother would have been, because if it wasn't for that invading nation, you wouldn't have been king at all. Does that make sense? So that's kind of why they would do things like that. They'd always put a non-official heir on the throne, so that that person would be loyal to them to keep that position. So that's kind of what happened there after the Battle of Megiddo. But anyway, that's kind of at the end of his reign. But Josiah was a really good king. He's the only good king during the remaining. He's the last good king, and after that, everyone's really bad as we go into the decline of the kingdom. And just an interesting little note, too, is Josiah's reign was really long, but then after that, there's kind of a progression that a teacher pointed out to me that I think is cool. But Jehoahaz was 3 months, and then Jehoiakim was 11 years, and then Jehoiachin was 3 months, and Zedekiah was 11 years. So as you look at the end of the kings, it's this 3 months, 11 years, 3 months, 11 years, down to the end. So you have these really short reigns where the true heir is put on the throne, and then they're quickly removed, and then somebody else reigns for a longer period of time that the conquering nation has put on the throne. But we'll deal with that more when we get into the future kings. But that's just a little bit about the reign of Josiah. And so what we're going to do tomorrow is we're going to start with these first 20 chapters in our first time together. We're going to go through Jeremiah's experience as a prophet, the content of his prophecies during this time. This is where we find his confessions, his wrestling with God, and we'll look about that together before we move on to the remaining kings. So, yeah, any questions as we close? Thank you. I'm glad you like it. So, I'm having fun. I hope you guys are. So, great. Well, God, thank you for this morning. Thank you for Jeremiah, and thank you for your mercy in pursuing your people so relentlessly. And God, I just pray that you'd help all of us to glean what you want us to glean out of this book that will make us more like you and help our thinking to be renewed mind thinking and not just the perspective of the world around us. In your name, amen. Is there any announcements or?